The call came at 2:47 a.m., shattering the silence of Vittorio Rinaldi's penthouse like gunfire. "Boss, she's gone again." Vittorio's blood turned to ice. Not again. Not Nonna Giulia. The 83-year-old woman was the only light left in his dark world, and now she'd vanished into the Chicago night for the third time this week. Her mind, once sharp as a blade, was fading like morning mist, leaving her lost and confused in a world that no longer made sense. "Find her," he commanded, his voice deadly calm despite the panic clawing at his chest. "Now." 20 minutes later, his security team had combed every street, checked every hospital, questioned every contact. Nothing. The most feared man in Chicago, the one who could locate anyone, anywhere, couldn't find the one person who mattered most. Then his phone buzzed. A text from his lieutenant. "Found her. Luna's Corner Cafe. She's safe." Vittorio's hands trembled as he read those words. Safe. But with whom? And why did his gut tell him that everything was about to change? Marina Alves had been working the morning shift at Luna's Corner Cafe for 3 years, but she'd never seen anything like the elderly woman who'd wandered in 20 minutes ago. The woman clutched a worn leather purse against her chest, her silver hair disheveled, eyes wide with confusion. She wore an expensive silk nightgown beneath a cashmere coat, and her fingers sparkled with diamonds that could feed a family for years. "Excuse me, dear." The woman approached Marina's counter, her Italian accent thick with worry. "I'm looking for my Vittorio, my grandson. Have you seen him?" Marina's heart clenched. She recognized the signs. Her own grandmother had suffered from dementia before passing 2 years ago. This woman wasn't just lost, she was trapped in the maze of her own mind. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Marina asked gently, coming around the counter. "Giulia. Giulia Rinaldi." The woman's voice cracked. "I need to find my boy. He needs me." Rinaldi. The name sent a chill down Marina's spine. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. But looking at this fragile, frightened woman, Marina saw only someone's beloved grandmother who needed help. "Let's sit down, Giulia," Marina said, guiding her to the corner booth. "I'll make you some tea, and we'll figure this out together." For the next hour, Marina sat with Giulia, listening to stories that jumped between decades. Sometimes Giulia was 25, worried about her young grandson starting school. Other times she was 40, proud of Vittorio's business success. The stories were beautiful and heartbreaking, painting a picture of a woman who'd loved fiercely and completely. "He's such a good boy," Giulia whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But the world made him hard. I just want him to remember how to smile." Marina squeezed the elderly woman's hands. "I'm sure he remembers, Giulia. Love like yours doesn't disappear." The cafe door chimed, and Marina looked up to see 3 men in dark suits enter. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Other customers suddenly found their phones very interesting, and her co-worker Danny disappeared into the kitchen. But it was the man who entered last who stole Marina's breath. Vittorio Rinaldi was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like she'd imagined. Tall and commanding, with dark hair perfectly styled and eyes like winter storms. His presence filled the small cafe, making it feel impossibly small. Everything about him screamed danger, from his tailored suit to the way his men flanked him like shadows. But when his gaze found his grandmother, something in his face cracked open. "Nonna," he breathed, crossing the cafe in 3 quick strides. Giulia looked up and her confusion melted into pure joy. "Vittorio, there you are, my beautiful boy." Marina watched in amazement as the most feared man in Chicago knelt beside the booth, taking his grandmother's hands with infinite gentleness. "I was so worried," he murmured in Italian, his voice thick with emotion. "This lovely girl took care of me," Giulia said, patting Marina's hand. "She has kind eyes like your mother did." Vittorio's gaze shifted to Marina, and she felt the full weight of his attention. His eyes were grey, she realized, not black as she'd expected, grey like storm clouds, and just as turbulent. "Thank you," he said simply, but the words carried the weight of a man who rarely expressed gratitude. Marina stood suddenly aware of how she must look, coffee-stained apron, tired eyes, hands rough from years of hard work. She just needed someone to listen. How much do I owe you? Vittorio reached for his wallet, but Marina shook her head. Nothing. She's someone's grandmother. That's enough. Something flickered in Vittorio's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. He helped Giulia to her feet, wrapping her coat around her shoulders. Come on, Nonna. Let's go home. As they reached the door, Giulia turned back. Marina, dear, will I see you again? Before Marina could answer, Vittorio spoke. If that's what you want, Nonna. His eyes met Marina's across the cafe. We'll be back. It wasn't a question. It was a promise that sent shivers down Marina's spine, whether from fear or anticipation she couldn't tell. After they left, the cafe slowly returned to normal, but Marina's hands still trembled as she cleared their table. She'd just encountered the most dangerous man in Chicago, and somehow she'd agreed to see him again. What had she gotten herself into? 3 days later, Marina was wiping down tables when the black SUV pulled up outside Luna's corner. Her pulse quickened as Vittorio emerged, but this time he was alone with Giulia. Marina. Giulia's face lit up as they entered. I told Vittorio you'd be here. Good morning, Giulia. Marina smiled, though her eyes kept drifting to Vittorio. He looked different today. Still dangerous, but somehow more human. How are you feeling? Better, now that I found you again. Giulia settled into their usual booth. Vittorio, sit. Marina makes the best coffee in the city. Vittorio hesitated, clearly uncomfortable in the humble surroundings, but his grandmother's happiness won out. He slid into the booth, his large frame making the small space feel even more intimate. 2 coffees, Marina said, not waiting for his order. Something told her he needed the routine as much as Giulia did. As she prepared their drinks, Marina could feel Vittorio watching her every movement. When she returned to the table, Giulia was showing him old photographs from her purse. This is you at 5. Giulia pointed to a picture of a dark-haired boy with serious eyes. You were always so protective even then. Vittorio's expression softened as he studied the photo. I remember that day. You taught me to make pasta. And you got flour everywhere. Giulia laughed, the sound like silver bells. Your mother was so angry, but I told her, he's learning to create, not destroy. That's important. Marina set down their coffee, trying not to intrude on the intimate moment. But Giulia reached for her hand. Sit with us, dear. I want to hear about your family. Nonna, Vittorio's voice held a warning. Miss Alves is working. Actually, it's my break, Marina said, surprising herself. There was something about Giulia that made her want to stay, to be part of this small pocket of warmth in what she suspected was Vittorio's cold world. I have a younger sister, Sophia, Marina began, settling into the booth across from them. She's in college, studying to be a teacher. How wonderful. Giulia clapped her hands. Education is so important. Vittorio, you should meet this sister. Marina caught the flash of panic in Vittorio's eyes and quickly changed the subject. What about you, Giulia? Tell me about when Vittorio was little. For the next hour, Giulia regaled them with stories of Vittorio's childhood, his first day of school, his attempts to cook for her when she was sick, the way he'd read to her every night even as a teenager. With each story, Marina saw glimpses of the man beneath the dangerous exterior. He was going to be a teacher, you know, Giulia said proudly. Loved books, loved learning. But then, her face clouded over and she looked confused again. Nonna, Vittorio said gently, that's enough stories for today. But Marina had caught the pain that flashed across his face. Whatever had changed his path from teacher to crime boss, it hadn't been his choice. I should get back to work, Marina said, sensing the shift in mood. As she stood, Giulia grabbed her hand. You'll be here tomorrow. Marina looked at Vittorio, seeing something vulnerable in his expression. If you want me to be. We do, Giulia said firmly. Don't we, Vittorio? He nodded slowly. Yes, we do. That evening, as Marina walked to her second job at the diner, she couldn't stop thinking about the contradiction that was Vittorio Rinaldi. The way he'd looked at those childhood photos, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to his grandmother, the pain he tried so hard to hide. She was playing with fire, and she knew it. but for the first time in years she felt truly alive. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for today." Marina stared at the message, her heart racing. How had he gotten her number? More importantly, why did she care more about the fact that he'd thought to thank her than the fact that he'd somehow tracked down her personal information? She typed back, "Your grandmother is special." The response came immediately. "So are you." Marina stopped walking, reading the words again and again. 3 simple words that changed everything. She was definitely playing with fire, and she was starting to think she didn't mind getting burned. 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised them all. Every morning at 10, Vittorio would arrive with Julia, and they'd spend an hour at Luna's corner. Sometimes Julia was lucid and bright, sharing stories and asking about Marina's life. Other days she was confused and frightened, but Marina's presence always seemed to calm her. Vittorio watched it all with growing amazement. His grandmother, who'd been declining rapidly over the past months, was having more good days. She smiled more, ate better, and most importantly, she seemed at peace. "It's you," he told Marina one morning as Julia napped in the booth between them. "You're helping her remember who she is." Marina's cheeks flushed. "I'm not doing anything special. I just listen." "That's everything," Vittorio said quietly. "No one listens anymore, they just wait for their turn to speak." Their conversations had grown deeper over the weeks. Marina learned that Vittorio spoke 4 languages, had read every book in his extensive library, and still remembered his grandmother's pasta recipes by heart. Vittorio discovered that Marina sent most of her earnings to pay for her sister's college, that she'd never traveled outside of Illinois, and that she had a laugh that could light up the darkest room. "Why don't you go to school yourself?" he asked one afternoon. Marina shrugged. "Someone has to work. Sophia's the smart one." "That's not true." Vittorio's voice was firm. "You're one of the most intelligent people I've ever met." "You don't know many waitresses, do you?" Marina teased, but her heart fluttered at the compliment. "I know people," Vittorio said seriously, "and you're extraordinary." The air between them crackled with tension. Marina felt drawn to him in ways that terrified her. He was dangerous, complicated, and completely wrong for her. But when he looked at her like that, like she was something precious, she forgot all the reasons she should stay away. "Vittorio," she whispered, not sure what she was asking. He leaned closer, his hand covering hers on the table. "Marina, where am I?" Julia's confused voice broke the moment. She looked around the cafe with frightened eyes. "I don't know this place." "You're safe, Nonna," Vittorio said immediately, his attention shifting to his grandmother. "You're with me and Marina." "Marina?" Julia looked at her blankly. Marina's heart broke a little, but she kept her voice gentle. "I'm a friend, Julia. Would you like some tea?" For the next 20 minutes, they worked together to calm Julia, and slowly, recognition returned to her eyes. "Oh, my dear," she said to Marina, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. Sometimes I just disappear." "You never disappear," Marina said firmly. "You're always here in your heart, and we'll always find you." Vittorio stared at Marina with something that looked dangerously close to love. This woman, who had every reason to walk away from his complicated, dangerous life, stayed. She stayed, and she cared, and she made his grandmother smile. That night, Vittorio called Marina. Not texted, called. "Is everything okay?" she answered, immediately worried. "She's asking for you," Vittorio said. "She can't sleep, and she keeps saying she needs to tell Marina something important." Marina didn't hesitate. "I'll be right there." "Marina, you don't understand. My home. It's not like the cafe. There are guards, security. It might frighten you." "Your grandmother needs me," Marina said simply. "Nothing else matters." An hour later, Marina stood outside the Rinaldi mansion, her breath catching at the sheer size and grandeur of it. But when Vittorio opened the door, wearing jeans and a simple black sweater, he looked more human than she'd ever seen him. "Thank you for coming," he said, leading her through marble hallways lined with priceless art. Julia's room was warm and inviting, filled with family photos and fresh flowers. The elderly woman was sitting up in bed, looking small and fragile in the enormous space. "Marina!" she exclaimed, reaching out her arms. "I knew you'd come." Marina sat on the edge of the bed, taking Julia's hands. "What did you want to tell me?" "I'm dying," Julia said matter-of-factly. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. And I need to know that my Vittorio won't be alone." "Nonna," Vittorio started, but Julia held up a hand. "He thinks he's a monster," she continued, looking directly at Marina. "But he's not. He's a man who's forgotten how to hope. Can you help him remember?" Marina looked across the bed at Vittorio, seeing the pain and vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. "I can try." "Good," Julia smiled, settling back against her pillows. "Now I can sleep." As Julia drifted off, Marina and Vittorio sat in comfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. "She's right, you know, about the dying." "I know," Marina whispered. "I can see it. And about the other thing, too. I am a monster." Marina stood and walked around the bed to where he sat. Without hesitation, she cupped his face in her hands. "No," she said firmly. "You're a man who's been hurt. There's a difference." Vittorio closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "Marina, you don't know what I've done, what I'm capable of." "I know what I see," she said. "I see a man who loves his grandmother more than his own life. I see someone who's gentle and kind when he thinks no one is watching. I see you, Vittorio, the real you." When he opened his eyes, they were bright with unshed tears. "You're going to destroy me." "Or save you," Marina whispered. He stood slowly, his hands coming up to cover hers. "I can't promise you safety. My world is dangerous." "I'm not asking for safety," so Marina said. "I'm asking for truth." "The truth is that I'm falling in love with you," Vittorio said, his voice rough with emotion, "and that terrifies me more than any enemy ever has." "The truth is that I'm already in love with you," Marina replied, "and I'm not going anywhere." Vittorio kissed her then, soft and desperate, and full of promises neither of them could voice. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Stay," he whispered against her forehead. "Tonight. Just stay." Marina nodded, and for the first time in years, Vittorio Rinaldi fell asleep with hope in his heart. But in the shadows outside the mansion, enemies watched and planned. The most feared man in Chicago had found something to lose. And that made him vulnerable. 3 weeks of stolen moments had passed. Mornings at the cafe, evenings at the mansion. Quiet conversations that stretched into dawn. Marina had never been happier, and Vittorio was transforming before her eyes. He smiled more, laughed at Julia's stories, and had even started reading again. But happiness, Marina was learning, was a fragile thing in Vittorio's world. The morning started normally. Julia was having a good day, chattering about her plans to teach Marina her famous ragu recipe. Vittorio had stepped outside to take a business call, leaving the women alone in the cafe. "He's different," Julia said suddenly, watching her grandson through the window. "Lighter. You did that." "He did that himself," Marina protested. You just loved him," Julia finished. "Sometimes that's everything." Marina was about to respond when she noticed the black sedan that had been parked across the street for the past hour. Something about it felt wrong. "Julia," she said carefully, "I think we should go inside." But it was too late. The cafe door burst open, and 3 men in dark clothing entered. Marina recognized the type immediately. They had the same dangerous energy as Vittorio's men, but their eyes were cold, calculating. "Marina Alves," the leader said, his accent thick and unfamiliar. "You're coming with us?" "No," Marina said firmly, stepping in front of Julia. "Whatever this is about, leave her out of it." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This is about sending a message to Vittorio Rinaldi. He's gotten too comfortable, too soft. Time to remind him what he has to lose." Through the window, Marina could see Vittorio still on his phone, his back to the cafe. She had maybe 30 seconds before these men dragged her away, and Julia would be left alone and confused. "Please," Marina said, her voice steady despite her fear. "She's an old woman. She has nothing to do with your business." "Everyone has something to do with our business," the man replied, signaling to his companions. That's when Marina made a choice that would change everything. Instead of running, instead of screaming, she stepped forward. "If you want me, take me, but you leave her alone." "Marina, no!" Julia cried, suddenly lucid and terrified. The leader grabbed Marina's arm, but before he could drag her toward the door, it exploded inward. Vittorio stood in the doorway, and Marina had never seen anything more terrifying or beautiful in her life. His face was a mask of cold fury, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Behind him, his men moved with deadly precision. "Let her go." Each word was a bullet. "Rinaldi," the leader said, but his confidence was wavering. You were just leaving," Vittorio finished. "And if I ever see you near what's mine again, I'll forget that I'm trying to be a better man." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Marina could feel the violence crackling around them, but Vittorio's eyes never left hers. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Marina shook her head, but she was trembling. "Julia, I'm fine, my boy," Julia said, though she was pale and shaken. "Marina protected me." Something dangerous flashed in Vittorio's eyes as he looked at the men who'd threatened them. "Get out, now, and tell your boss that if he wants to discuss territory, he can call me directly. But if he ever comes near my family again, I'll end him." The men left quickly, but Marina knew this wasn't over. In protecting her and Julia, Vittorio had shown his hand. His enemies now knew exactly how to hurt him. "We need to go," Vittorio said, helping Julia to her feet. "It's not safe here anymore." As they left the cafe, Marina looked back at the place that had become their sanctuary. She had a sinking feeling she'd never see it again. Back at the mansion, Vittorio was a man transformed. The gentleness Marina had come to love was buried beneath layers of cold calculation. "You're leaving Chicago," he told her as his men secured the house. "Tonight. I'll arrange everything, new identity, money, protection." "No," Marina said simply. Vittorio stopped pacing and stared at her. "This isn't a negotiation, Marina. They know about you now. They'll use you to get to me. Then we face it together." "You don't understand," Vittorio's voice cracked. "I can't lose you. I won't survive it." Marina crossed the room and took his hands in hers. "Then don't lose me. Fight for me. Fight for us." "I am fighting for you," he said desperately, "by keeping you safe." "Safe isn't living," Marina replied, "and I'd rather have one day of real life with you than a lifetime of hiding." Julia, who had been quietly watching from her chair, spoke up. "She's right, my boy. Love isn't about protecting someone from the world. It's about facing the world together." Vittorio looked between the two women who meant everything to him. "If I do this, if we do this, there's no going back. My enemies will never stop coming. Then we'll be stronger than they are," Marina said. "All of us. Together." That night, as they planned their next moves, Marina realized she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She was no longer just a waitress who'd fallen in love with a dangerous man. She was part of his world now, for better or worse, and she'd never been more certain of anything in her life. 6 months after the cafe incident, Marina barely recognized her old life. The humble apartment she'd shared with Sophia was a memory, replaced by the mansion that had become home. But more than her surroundings had changed. She had changed, and so had Vittorio. The man who had once ruled through fear now led through respect. He'd systematically removed himself from the violent aspects of the family business, focusing instead on legitimate enterprises, restaurants, real estate, investments. It wasn't easy and it wasn't without cost, but Vittorio was determined to build something worthy of the women he loved. "The Chicago Tribune wants to interview you," Marco, his lieutenant, announced during their morning meeting, "about the community center project." Vittorio looked up from the architectural plans spread across his desk. The Giulia Rinaldi Community Center was his latest project, a place where elderly residents could receive care and support, inspired by his grandmother's struggles. "Set it up," he said, "but I want Marina there with me." Marina, who was reviewing applications for the center's staff, looked surprised. "Vittorio, I'm not—" "You're the heart of this project," he interrupted. "You should be there." It was true. Marina had thrown herself into the community center with the same passion she'd shown in caring for Giulia. She'd researched best practices, interviewed potential staff, and designed programs that would actually help families dealing with dementia and aging. "How is she today?" Marina asked, nodding toward the sunroom where Giulia spent her mornings. Vittorio's expression softened. "Good day. She's been asking about the wedding plans." Marina blushed. They'd been engaged for 2 months now, but Giulia brought up the wedding at least 3 times a day. Sometimes she forgot they were already engaged and would suggest that Vittorio make an honest woman of Marina. "Speaking of which," Vittorio said, pulling a folder from his desk, "the venue coordinator needs final numbers by Friday." Marina opened the folder to find detailed plans for what looked like the wedding of the century. "Vittorio, it's too much." "Nothing is too much for you," he said, coming around the desk to wrap his arms around her. "Besides, Nonna has very specific ideas about how her grandson should get married." As if summoned by their conversation, Giulia appeared in the doorway, leaning on her walker but smiling brightly. "Are you talking about my wedding?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Your wedding," Marina laughed. "I thought it was our wedding." "All weddings are mine," Giulia declared, settling into the chair Vittorio had pulled out for her. "I've been planning this one since the day I met you, dear." Vittorio knelt beside his grandmother's chair. "And what have you planned, Nonna?" "White roses," she said immediately. "Lots of them. And that dress we saw in the magazine, the one with the long train. And dancing. There must be dancing." Marina's eyes filled with tears. Even as Giulia's memory faded, her love remained constant and pure. "There will be dancing," Marina promised, "and white roses, and anything else you want." "What I want," Giulia said, reaching for both their hands, "is for you to be happy. Both of you. Promise me you'll be happy." "We promise, Nonna," Vittorio said, his voice thick with emotion. That afternoon, while Giulia napped, Marina found Vittorio in his study, staring out the window at the garden. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, settling into his lap. "I was thinking about the man I used to be," he said quietly. "Before you. Before I remembered what it felt like to hope. Do you miss it, that life?" Vittorio considered the question seriously. "I miss the simplicity of it, when everything was black and white, when I didn't have to worry about protecting something precious. And now? Now I have everything to lose," he said, tightening his arms around her. "But I also have everything to live for." Marina kissed him softly. "No regrets?" "Only one," Vittorio said, "that it took me so long to find you." 2 weeks later, they stood in the garden of the mansion, surrounded by white roses and the people they loved most. Giulia sat in the front row, wearing her best dress and the biggest smile Marina had ever seen. As they exchanged vows, Marina thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a confused elderly woman and a cup of coffee, but it had become something neither of them could have imagined. "I promise to love you through every storm," Vittorio said, slipping the ring onto her finger. "To choose you every day and to never forget that you saved me." "I promise to stand beside you," Marina replied, "to believe in the man you are and the man you're becoming, and to love you with everything I have." When they kissed, sealing their promises, Giulia clapped her hands with pure joy. "Finally," she called out, making everyone laugh, "my boy is married." Later, as they danced under the stars, Marina whispered in Vittorio's ear, "Your grandmother looks happy." "She is," he said, spinning her gently. "We all are." And for the first time in his life, Vittorio Rinaldi believed in forever. 2 years later, Marina stood in the nursery of their new home, a beautiful house on Lake Michigan, far from the darkness of Vittorio's old life. In her arms, she held their 6-month-old daughter, Giulia Rose Rinaldi. The baby had her father's dark hair and her great-grandmother's gentle eyes. She was perfect in every way, and she had brought even more light into their already bright world. "How are my girls?" Vittorio asked from the doorway, still wearing his suit from the community center's board meeting. "Perfect," Marina said, not taking her eyes off their daughter. She's been asking for her papa all day. Vittorio crossed the room and took the baby from Marina's arms, his expression melting into pure love. "Hello, Principessa," he murmured in Italian. "Did you miss me?" Little Giulia gurgled happily, reaching for her father's face with tiny hands. "The center is officially opening next month," Vittorio announced. "The waiting list is already 3 pages long." "Nonna would be so proud," Marina said softly. Giulia Rinaldi had passed peacefully in her sleep 8 months ago, just 2 weeks after Marina had told her about the pregnancy. Her last words had been about the baby, how she couldn't wait to teach her to make pasta and tell her stories about her papa. "She is proud," Vittorio said, looking down at their daughter. "I can feel her watching over us." Marina leaned against her husband's side, watching him with their baby. The transformation was complete. The dangerous man she'd fallen in love with had become the devoted father and husband she'd always known he could be. "Do you ever think about that first day?" she asked, when Nonna wandered into the cafe. "Every day," Vittorio said. "Best day of my life." Even though she was lost and confused? Vittorio looked at Marina with all the love in the world. She wasn't lost. She was exactly where she needed to be. She was bringing me to you. As the sun set over the lake, the Rinaldi family stood together in their nursery, surrounded by love and hope and the promise of all the tomorrows to come. Giulia had gotten her wish. They were happy, truly and completely happy. And in the gentle breeze that rustled the curtains, they could almost hear an elderly woman's laughter, blessing the family she'd helped create.